Well, Devel Morrison of Bosley Real Estate and regular contributor here at Toronto This Weekend joins me now for our weekly real estate check-in. Hey, Devel.
Hey, how are ya?
Good. How are you?
Good.
So stats released by ratehub.ca shows that even though house prices have declined across Canada, more income is needed to afford a
Mm,
home. So in 2022, the income required to own a home here in Toronto was around $210,000. Now it's $217,000. And this is calculated with a mortgage rate of 5.54% in 2023 and 3.14% in March 2022. This is just going to scare off more people.
Well, I mean, I think because the interest rates are so high, they're being stress tested
Yeah.
at 2% higher than the high interest rate. The sad part about this is that there's more mortgage restrictions coming. So your income is going to need to be even higher. So, yeah, that is the tragedy of this is that, yeah, it does require more to buy a home. And it's crazy that you need $217,000
Mhm.
on an annual basis to buy a house. Now, that being said, these stats are based on buying a house, not necessarily buying a condo.
Yeah.
So, they are, it is a bad story for sure. You need less income if you're going to buy a condo. Or, on the other hand, if you want to move to Winnipeg, because I did notice the same stats for Winnipeg was that you only needed $68,000 last year. And this year, you need $75,000 as your base income in 2023 to be able to buy a house in Winnipeg.
Yeah. I mean, I know I ask this question every once in a while, Devel, but even you just pointed it out. Like, when you look at these figures and you compare them, I mean, besides Toronto, Vancouver is the highest.
Yeah.
Last year, a little over $200,000 income needed to buy a home. This year, $221,000. I just think we're going to see more people leave the city. I agree with you. Condos are an option, but there are a lot of people that fortunately or unfortunately, because I think I'm in that group as well. I had this idea of wanting a home, wanting a house, wanting a driveway. And I was able to get that many years ago. So will people still, running after that dream decide that, yeah, I'm just going to leave the city? Because we are seeing that.
We definitely are seeing that for sure. But I would say people also need to change the dream.
Mm.
I mean, people in Hong Kong, people in other places around the world do not think for a second they can buy a house with a driveway in the middle of their city. I mean, we are so fortunate here in Toronto to have what we have. You can't even do this in New York City, right? In New York City, everybody is living in condos. That's the norm. The only people that have houses move to Connecticut and places far, far away.
Yeah.
So, I think that we also have to reframe how we look at our lives in Toronto because our lives are pretty awesome. Having a house in the city, you can't do this in most cities. And so, is it a bad thing that somebody, I always say this, starts on the property ladder with getting a condo first, and then perhaps they move to a bigger condo, then they move to a smaller house? I mean, there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
To me, the idea of, hey, I got to have a house immediately is akin to walking into your first day of work and saying, hey, I want to be CEO right now. You got to work for this.
What's wrong with
right?
that?
Right? Like we got to work for stuff. It can't be immediate. We live in this culture of like immediate gratification.
Yeah.
No, you got to work hard. You got to work your way up. You start small. And, maybe that means that you buy a place outside of the city as a rental property just to get your foothold in the real estate market. So you can start small. And then one day you sell that so that you can buy something in the city. So it's about being creative. It's about being patient. It's about recognizing you got to start small. And our city is still pretty great compared to other cities.
It is a great city and has great highways to drive in and out of it. I'm just saying, for those people that are like, I'm just going to live in the 905 or outskirts and be able to afford something outside. Okay, another headline in the news this week, Toronto luxury home sales have also taken a beating. They are down. So homes over $4 million have seen a significant decline. I mean, I'm like, How many people can afford a home after over $4 million? I can see that decline. But that's a real issue for some who are looking for, a luxury home.
Absolutely. But I mean, you have to keep in mind the costs of buying and selling in the luxury market are significantly high.
Yeah.
I mean, between the double land transfer tax, there are going to be real estate commissions. And now the mortgage rates are so high, you've got to, think about the fact that you've got a cost associated with breaking your mortgage. And that's expensive,
Yeah.
right? So if somebody adds up all those things, they're like, you know what? My house is just fine. Thank you very much. I'm not leaving.
Yeah.
So
I think even if you're not in the luxury house market, you are thinking about that, like you're thinking, is it worth it?
Exactly. Absolutely. So, I mean, I think the luxury market is no different. That being said, luxury homes do take a little bit longer to sell. So, that's usually if you're in a luxury home, you're in no rush to sell.
Yeah.
And so therefore you're like, let me just wait this out, or let me wait until I find exactly what I want before I put that on the market. Now, that being said, I have seen some houses in the over $3 million category get snapped up right away because there are buyers out there looking for that. There just are. I mean, sometimes for me as an agent, I'm shocked at how much money people have. It is kind of shocking.
Yeah. Okay. This is an interesting story. Toronto's city planner has released a final set of recommendations. We were waiting for this to happen. The recommendations that would see multiplex housing allowed in all neighborhoods across the city. I think I know what you're going to say. Is this a good thing?
It's great.
Yeah.
It's awesome. We need more housing. This is the fastest way for us to get more housing is to create, duplexes, triplexes, fourplexes with houses that already exist. I mean, think about the fact that there are so many older people in the city who are living in these massive houses by themselves. And wouldn't it be great for them to be able to age in place and say, you know what? I only want to keep the first floor of my house. That's all I need. Let me, create a second unit on the second or the third floor. Maybe they're going to do it for their kids. Maybe they're going to do it and rent it out. But, I think this is a great way to create more housing a lot faster. I'm all for building condos, but the reality is that this is a much faster way to densify our housing is to do the multiplexes. Now, what we need to get away from is the NIMBYism around it, because I remember reading an article recently about some people who had created a triplex on a street around the Avenue Road in Eglinton area. And it was a stunning triplex. I mean, it was modern. It was gorgeous. But basically their neighbors were like, lining up with trying to picket because they were so upset that renters were going to live next door. So, man, we need to change our mindset around that. There's nothing wrong with renters, and there's nothing wrong with living next door to a triplex.
Yeah, and these are recommendations right now that does still have to pass through City Hall. But if this comes to fruition, it sounds like it will. The recommended changes will see that buildings will not go above 10. I think they said 10 meters or 3 stories. Again, according to the design. But there are some that make valuable arguments that they want to make sure that these triplex, multiplexes are affordable. And I think that's a valuable statement that, you can build these beautiful buildings, but if they're not affordable, then we're actually not solving the problem here of, a lack of affordable homes.
Well, they're not going to be affordable. I would love to say, yeah, great, let's do that. But they're not. I mean, I just look at my own basement apartment and, hearing that I can charge somewhere between $1,600 or $1,800 a month for my basement apartment now, that's not necessarily affordable to everybody. Years and years ago, I was getting $1,200 for my basement apartment, and now I can get a lot of money.
Yeah. So this week also, interesting story that popped up in the news. More developers, specifically I would say condos, but maybe you can shed some light maybe in, the housing market as well. Developers are offering incentives to prospective homeowners to bring them in to obviously purchase their condos. What does that say about the market and how developers are willing to hang some carrots in front of prospective home buyers? I mean, this is like being willing to pay homeowners almost $2,500 per month for the first 2 years for their condo closings. For 2 bedrooms, $3,000 a month for 24 months. There are a lot of incentives out there.
Yes, there are. I mean, those incentives are really targeted towards the developer crowd. I mean, sorry, the investor crowd is what I
Investors,
should
yeah,
say.
yeah.
Because it's, they're offering to pay $2,500 a month or $3,000 a month after the condo is built. Someone, an end user who wants to live in the place, obviously that's not useful to them because they actually want to move into the place. But I mean, selling pre-construction condos right now is pretty difficult. You've got delays, you've got the huge amount of development charges that the city has recently increased drastically. Plus, you also have the fact that, and this has been happening for the last few years, you are paying a higher price per square foot in a pre-construction condo than you are a resale condo. So these developers are competing with the resale condo market that is actually cheaper and would allow you to buy your place and use it, let's say within, 30 to 60 days versus waiting a number of different years.
Have you heard of other incentives that you're just like, wow, that's amazing?
I've heard of like less down payment. So generally with the pre-construction condos, you might have to put, let's say, 15% or usually 20% up front.
Right.
But I've heard of people scaling that back to as low as 5% up front. Again, this is just to get people in the market. But the pre-con market right now is tough. I mean, I'm seeing on the market, people are having assignment sales. And that's when, someone has purchased a condo back in, let's say, 2017 or 2018. It's not ready until now. The building's about to get registered, so it's going to close. But interest rates have gone up so significantly, people can no longer afford to close on the condo they bought many years ago.
Yeah.
So because interest rates are so high and they've had to do the stress test. So you've got people who can't close. So hence the fact that I've never seen so many assignment sales out there in the marketplace. So I understand why the incentives are there, but I think that people who buy the pre-construction condos, they really need to think about, does this make sense for them?
Yeah. Okay, another headline from this week, more and more people are working in a hybrid model, and that means many office buildings across the city are empty, and especially in the downtown core are vacant. Could this be a solution by actually opening up some of these vacant buildings and transforming them, conforming them into living spaces, into condos, into apartment buildings? Apparently, Avison Young found that about 923 office buildings in Toronto alone fit the criteria, followed by Montreal at 611 and Vancouver by 548 and so forth, into being converted into potential condos, housing dwellings or places, apartment buildings. Do you think this makes sense? I think it does.
I think it's a good idea on paper, but I think in reality, it might be a little bit tougher than that. I mean, I saw that the way that they were doing their stats and their criteria, but I mean, you got to look at the floor plates of some of these buildings in terms of plumbing and retrofitting that plumbing. If you take an office building, you really only have plumbing in one section where the washrooms are.
Yeah.
But if you're looking for a residential use, you need plumbing everywhere, kitchens, bathrooms. It's not like you're going to be creating, one spacious unit on that one floor plate. That might actually be more feasible than creating, chopping it up into multiple uses. So I think that that's still pretty difficult.
But would it be cheaper to change that than to actually build another building?
I think that there's a lot more involved. This is the thing, right? So I think that it depends on the building.
Yeah.
Right. And so that's why I think that when you take something based on stats, which is something that actually needs to be individually looked at, by that architect, by that designer, I think, I feel like we're almost simplifying a problem that I'm not sure is really that simple. In terms of the work involved with trying to retrofit a commercial building for residential use.
Right. And again, I mean, there are hundreds of thousands of buildings all around the country. And this is
Mm-hmm.
dwindling it down to those that they think could potentially work. And, they say around 923 of those buildings. So if they can't be turned into condos or apartment buildings or some sort of dwelling for people, then what do we do with all of these empty buildings?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, maybe they get turned into some sort of community hubs, so they do become more communal spaces for people. But we also do have a huge homeless problem. So
Mm-hmm.
maybe if we can create a more communal living option, again, that addresses the issue that I mentioned about plumbing,
Mm-hmm.
something like that. I think we just have to get more creative about those uses instead.
Yeah. Potential shelters. Okay.
Mm-hmm,
Let's
mm-hmm.
move on from real estate to some of the other big news stories from this week that caught your eye, Devel. So this week, we heard that Galen Weston will be replaced with a new president CEO of Loblaw in a year. Per Bank is this gentleman's name, and he's currently the CEO of a Danish retail chain. He will be taking the top job. The statement says that this was part of a talent search that began last year. So my question is, why did I mean,
Mm-hmm.
for those of us who shop at Loblaw, I feel like it's a we. Why did Loblaw give Galen Weston this pay increase that we just talked about a couple weeks ago? He went
Right?
from $10.6 million to $11.8 million. If they knew that they were searching for a new CEO, why did that happen?
Yeah, I thought that was also weird. But then I started thinking, you know what? That's exactly why they gave him the pay increase.
Because
Because I
he's
guess when
leaving?
they were doing no, because when they were doing the search, they realized that the CEO of their company was underpaid and they weren't going to
Ah,
be able to get somebody to come here unless they brought the CEO pay up to the standard of everybody else.
yeah, that's
So I
fair.
gather that that's why they increased his pay, was really so that the next guy can be paid something similarly, because I gather it would have been a worse PR blitz to be able to say, oh, new guy came in and we're going to pay him $3 million more. People would be really upset. They're
That's a
still
great
upset with,
point.
yeah, they're still upset with Galen Weston making that, but now I see that there was some method to their madness.
Yeah. Do you think this gives the opportunity for Loblaw to rebrand itself with Galen Weston kind of taking a back seat?
No, I actually kind of think, why are you getting a new CEO? I mean, Galen Weston is the face of the company, right?
Mm-hmm.
He's doing commercials. He's still going to be the chair of the Loblaw's board. He's still the CEO of George Weston. Like, I feel like we're just playing with chess pieces. It's silly. Just
Mm.
keep Galen Weston in there. It's not like he's old and needs to retire.
This was his choice. He has said in a call to investors that it was his choice, that it was also his desire to kind of be in the background, and feels that that's the best place for him to be. So again, that's the public facing statement that's been made. We always know that there is internal things that happen behind the scenes, but from what we know, this is the statement that he's made, that this is a desire that he has had for a while. All right. In another story, how do you feel about TTC stations being named after a corporation? City Councillor and
Yes.
TTC board member Stephen Holiday proposed a motion, and should the TTC sell naming rights and sponsorships as an income generator? I think it's brilliant.
Yeah, so do I. And I think it's really interesting when I'm reading online. People are pissed about this.
Yeah.
And I should preface this with saying that before I was a real estate agent, I did work 15 years in selling sponsorships.
Okay.
So I can tell you, number one, I think this is a great idea. Number two, what I don't think is a good idea is renaming the stations. Keep the stations what they are. It's going to be too expensive to change the station maps every time a sponsor comes on board.
Mm-hmm.
What they should be doing is, imagine walking onto, a beautifully furnished platform from Leon's or HomeSense or Wayfair, right? Imagine, what about having a radio station, hello, like AM 640, pumped through the station? What about a record label that has a new artist that's dropped an album and the record label wants to be a sponsor? To me, this is about improve the rider experience, add bottom line in dollars to the TTC, so that way they can stop increasing fares. But this should be a win-win all around. It shouldn't just be the naming rights, right? It's, let's have hand wipes provided on trains and buses by Procter and Gamble. Like, let's actually use this to enhance the rider experience as well.
I agree. I think we have to start thinking outside the box. We say this all the time on this show. I think that's one of my biggest pet peeves, even about just, the campaign right now. We need people thinking outside the box. I actually like the idea of changing the names. I think people are resilient. We will learn the new names. It's okay. Things can change. And if that means that more money is coming into the TTC to make it more affordable, safer, all of the things that we need to do in order to make the TTC the better way and get it up to the place where it needs to be, I say do it. But that's just my opinion.
No, I'm with you. I also agree. I'm like, let's just do it.
Yeah.
But it's funny. So a friend of mine pointed out to me about the naming of the station. She basically said, okay, so if there's violence committed on the, brand name X station, that is going to fall negatively on the brand. And so that's why the naming of the stations, I'm like, okay, there's other things they can do to disassociate brands from the bad things that happen on the TTC.
All right. Thanks so much, Deval.
Oh, thanks so much.